I tell you I had such a difficult time titling this book, okay? The title at the time was, I'm looking at my notes, The Space the Snow Holds. Which is like, I mean, whatever, it's fine, it's not awful, the space the snow holds, but like, it's trying to sound poetic, and you can tell it's trying to sound poetic. Hey everybody, my name is Emily Paige Wilson. I am a poet, and I also write novels in verse for young adult readers. Welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, welcome. I make videos that are kind of a cross between AuthorTube and PoetTube and BookTube. And if you are new here, be sure to subscribe, because once we hit 100 subscribers, I will give away a copy of my most recent chapbook entitled Hypochondria, Least Powerful of the Greek Gods. But today I actually want to talk about how I got I was gonna say book deal. I guess it technically is a book deal. Why do I associate that phrase with novels specifically? But how I got the contract for my debut full-length collection of poetry, which is entitled Jalubí and will be coming out with Unsolicited Press in late spring of 2022. And real quickly, just in case those phrases are new to you, a chapbook is typically about 24 to 48 pages of poems, while a full-length collection tends to run about 48 to 96 pages, although those are just kind of rough industry guidelines. And there's been some conversation around why publish a chapbook versus a full-length collection. If I can find any good videos on YouTube or any blogs, I will try to leave those links down below. My understanding typically is that some projects are just smaller conceptually, and maybe they don't need the whole 96 pages of a full-length collection, so a chapbook is the better form for them. Sometimes they can also just be a really good way to kind of get your name out in the industry as well, instead of waiting for the time that it takes to produce and publish a full-length collection. Because you also have the option of taking some of the poems from your chapbook and turning them into a full-length collection later. Now, a caveat to that is most publishers won't let you pull more than about 25 poems from a chapbook. Sometimes publishers will say you can't have half of the collection that we're going to publish with you if it's full length. No more than half could have been published in a chapbook, or sometimes they'll say no more than 25. So it does depend. It's not necessarily that you can take your entire chapbook and republish it as a full length later. Now, some benefits of the full length: if you are interested in earning a professorship in your professional career, full lengths tend to hold more weight, a little bit more clout in that academic route. Not always, so take everything I'm saying with that kind of generalized grain of salt, but typically universities will be looking for your full length credentials. There are also a lot of awards that are going to be given to honor full lengths as opposed to chapbooks. So there's some conversation around maybe what's better if we're trying to build a long-term poetic career. So I have 2 chapbooks out. My first one came out in 2018. It's entitled I'll Build Us a Home from Finishing Line Press. And then most recently, Hypochondria, Least Powerful of the Greek Gods by Glass Poetry Press. And I will leave linked up somewhere where I did the work in progress tag. I did it retroactively, but I filmed it to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of that collection, in case you guys want to hear some more about chapbooks. To get back to my full length though, my full length is entitled Jalubí, and it will be out, like I said, late spring 2022 from Unsolicited Press, which is an independent press in Portland, and they publish across the genres. They publish fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. And my collection explores the time that I was able to study abroad in Prague, and I was trying to find the small farming village that my great-great-grandparents immigrated from the immigration started in the late 1920s. I believe that the family was quite large, so it bled into the 30s. We had a misspelling, like an anglicized misspelling of the Czech village, which I found out was near the Slovakian border. And the collection explores how I searched for that town and also trying to learn the language. There's a lot about translation theory in this collection, just the architecture of Prague and some of the history of Prague and my family legacy, my family lineage, especially through matriarchal lines. So I am very excited for you guys to be able to check it out. I will definitely leave links to the poems down below that have already been published. I also really quickly wanted to give a shout out to Hyla at Hyla Brook Books. She had asked in an earlier video how I got this poetry collection, this contract. This video had been on my docket to film for a while, but since it was requested by Hyla, I just wanted to give her a shout out, and I will leave her bookstore link down below. So like I mentioned earlier, most poetry books will be contracted for publication through the contest model. However, that's actually not how I ended up with the book deal. I was recommended, I think I made a post, I had gotten very close in a contest, or maybe it was with a press that I really liked. And if you are on submission now for your poetry collection, let me know down below. Let me know how it's going for you, what's been exciting about the process, what's been frustrating about the process, because it can be really frustrating. I made a post, I think, about how I was really close, or maybe that I was just getting tired because it is expensive, which we'll talk about. And one of my Twitter friends, who is also a poet, his name is Adrian Ernesto Cepeda, and he reached out to me, I think maybe it was a Twitter message, and he said, hey, I saw your post. I'm with Unsolicited Press. Here's the editor's email. I think that they would really like your work. They were a really good fit for my collection. And so that was in the summer of 2019. It was about 6 weeks before we were moving cross country. I don't remember. I was trying to think back. It was June 13th, 2019. I'm trying to remember if I knew I was going to be moving across country or not. It was a very stressful, busy time. So I reached out to the editors and I said, Adrian recommended me. He spoke very complimentary of y'all. Here's my collection in case you want to check it out. And they returned with an offer to publish the book in October. It was October 12th of 2019. And I remember I was in a coffee shop. Like at that point, we had just been in our new town for about a month, and I was, exploring the coffee shops, and I got that email. So that's the story of how I ended up with this book deal. It was a recommendation. It was kind of a connection in that way. And that definitely happens with some presses, although most are going to be contest models or open submission. So prior to Adrian reaching out, which was such a godsend for me at that time, I was in the thick of it. I was in the thick of it with the contest model. Like I mentioned in my work in progress video about my chapbook, where I talk about the 1-year anniversary of my chapbook, most poets aren't agented, and most poets are not going to use agents to get a book deal. Now, that's not necessarily true for all poets, and it's becoming more and more common, I think, to see poets who have agents if they're working on novels in verse. But for most people, you are probably going to make a colossal spreadsheet, or you can find, if I can find any, I'll leave them down below, but you're probably going to be looking at your favorite presses, and you're going to be tracking when their open reading periods are and when their contest periods are. And you will probably use your submittable or send them an email directly. And there's often a reading fee associated with that. And then you probably are going to have to wait quite a few months, maybe 3 to 6, until you get, the finalist list or the long list, the short list, until the book deal is announced. A lot of my grad school professors actually said to kind of, maybe tier your favorite, the same way that I think writers who reach out for agents will have kind of a tiered query submission process, kind of tier what your favorite presses are, who are the presses that you would absolutely love, like your dream presses, and apply to those first. And then, which presses are you not as familiar with necessarily, but the work you have seen from them, you do really like them. You've heard really positive feedback from the poets they've worked with. And then you can kind of submit accordingly. Now, the good thing is that you can submit to multiple presses, or you can submit to the same press multiple times. That's definitely okay, because this work is so subjective. Now, if you keep hearing no's and there's no personalized rejections, it might be helpful for you to kind of look at your collection and revise, and just always keep your finger on the pulse of the heart of the work, and to see if you can make any edits, even, all the way from structural to line edits. They're going to enhance the quality of the collection. But when you're submitting to contests, it typically is okay to resubmit to the same press, especially if they have rotating guest judges. But that's a little bit about how the contest model works. Like I said, it can be a long process. And I want to take the time to say that while it is long and arduous and it can be really frustrating, I mean, it's like constantly putting yourself out on submission if you do have an agent, essentially, except you are paying for it up front, whereas you will pay for an agent after the fact. But I do want to say that the editors and the volunteers a lot of times at the presses who read through all of the manuscripts that come in and are submitted, they are often doing this as a labor of love themselves, especially if it's an independent press, if it's a university press, for losing funding for those too. So you remember on Twitter, there was a conversation about poets and editors, and it was a little bit antagonistic, I think. And I think it's okay to mention that there are frustrations and deficits of time and funding on both ends. So we just want to throw that out there too, that I'm going to talk about the timeline and how much this process cost and share some of the frustrations in case you are in the thick of it yourself and you just need that validation that you are not alone. Or if you're about to start submitting your book, definitely if you're in any part of the process, let me know down below. I would love to hear how it's going for you. But I just want to throw that out there, that it can be a frustrating process for everybody involved, and that we really do this, the poets, the editors, the publishers, we do it because we love the work, and we've invested in the craft, and we've created these poems that we are really eager to share with readers. So prior to getting this recommendation from Adrian, prior to signing with Unsolicited Press, I was submitting my manuscript for almost 4 years.
4 years.
The first time I sent out my book, I hadn't even finished grad school yet. So I do want to be honest, the first time I sent out the book, it was not ready, y'all. It was not.
Who was she? It was not.
We're done. And I know a lot of editors will say, like, you really only have to submit please, for the sake of time, submit the manuscripts like once it is finished, once it is the highest quality. For me, the process of submitting has almost always kind of been a conversation where I can tell if I've submitted a collection and I wait a few weeks, I know it's under consideration. If I see things after the fact, I'm like,
oh shoot, I should have changed the order of these 2 poems, or like this theme, this word, I rely on it too heavily.
Part of the pressure of being on submission and being in the contest model, it forces me, but it also allows me to have sharper clarity when I look at my own work. So for me, submitting and editing is kind of hand in hand. Those processes are in conversation with each other. But typically, yes, you really should submit a project when you feel confident in the fact that it is,
why am I drawing on Dragon Ball Z language? Like, it's
final Super Saiyan form. Like, you want it to be good. My first attempt was not good, okay?
I mean, she just wasn't done.
She wasn't ready. It was December 20th, 2015. So it was the winter before I graduated. The title was not Jalubí. When I tell you I had such a difficult time titling this book, okay? The title at the time was, I'm looking at my notes, The Space the Snow Holds. Which is like, I mean, whatever. It's fine. It's not awful. The space the snow holds. But like, it's trying to sound poetic. And you can tell it's trying to sound poetic. And it didn't work. It didn't work. I don't think it works. If you have a project, a work in progress, and you have changed the title for the better, and you want to share maybe some of your cringe earlier titles, let me know down below, because this is a safe space. We are all friends here. But I stopped submitting, obviously, when I got the acceptance in October of 2019. So that's almost 4 years. 4 years of rejection, y'all. And we kept pushing through. And I will say, when you get your poetry collection, when you get your acceptance, if it is under submission with other presses, you probably are gonna have to pull them. And that's frustrating. That's, as excited as you are to finally have your book deal, it kind of hurt because I knew I was a semi-finalist or a finalist in some other competition. And this is how the competition model kind of gets in your head. You're like,
well, maybe the next one, maybe the next one.
So do be aware of that while it is so exciting to finally get an offer, if you are under active consideration at other presses, typically the respectful thing to do for everyone's time is to immediately pull it from the other presses. That's not always the case. There are some exceptions, but I'm just throwing that out there in case anybody is in that situation. It is a timely process. It is also an expensive process. Most times, not always, but most times, a lot of presses will have a reading fee. They're typically $20 to $25. I started my Patreon in January of 2020, and I have not been on submission for a poetry collection since then, but the money that I get from my Patreons, which shout out to you guys, I appreciate you so much. That money goes to support the cost of submitting. So I also want to talk about close calls, because it was 4 years of rejection, but it's 4 years of rejection interspersed with so many close calls that
are kind of soul crushing.
Like the maybe or the almost hurts more than the no, which seems counterintuitive, but I think that's an experience a lot of us have. So over those 4 years, I applied to a contest. I applied to 46 contests or open submission periods. So that's almost once a month. And of those 46 contests or open submission periods that I entered, 9 times I was either a finalist or a semi-finalist, or I received a personalized letter from the editor. But one of the most exciting, but also the most difficult ones was in 2016, I was a finalist for the Hudson Prize from Black Lawrence Press. Y'all know Black Lawrence Press is one of my favorite presses. So that was really...
You're so close. You're so close.
Now, obviously, if an editor or if a reader or a guest judge has from hundreds of manuscripts pulled yours out into like the top 10 or the top 15, please do take the time to celebrate that as a victory, because it is a win. There are so many talented poets. There's so many ways to engage yourself in this craft. There's so many ways to write poems. And the fact that your work resonated with somebody else's enough to push it along to the editor and say, hey, I would publish this, do not take that for granted, especially the first time it happens. Like, I think the first time that I was a semi-finalist, I was working, I think I mentioned this in my How I Got an Agent video. I was working as a tutor at one community college. I was working as an adjunct at another community college, like literally 100 miles away from my house. So I was making that commute multiple times a week. And then I was working a part-tail retail job. And the day that I found out I was a semi-finalist in a contest for the first time, I was working my retail job. I was closing. It was 10:30 at night. I go out to my car. I open my car. And in the passenger seat, my boyfriend had left me a bar of chocolate and a bouquet of lilies.
And the car smells so good.
Like, it was just the most meaningful, exciting moment. And I still think about that. Like, sometimes when I open my car door, it doesn't smell like lilies like 5 years later. But it was so sweet. And it just, embracing those moments when you are so close helps you move forward. Now, I wish, on one hand, I want to say, well, nothing's given to us, or nothing is promised to us, right? Like, I am not owed a book deal by anyone, and I want to make sure that I'm always writing because I love the craft of this. So I want to acknowledge that on one hand, and on the other hand, I want to acknowledge that the contest model is not fun, right? Like, being on submission is not fun, and you have so many close calls, and you can feel downtrodden through that process. And the reality is not all collections are going to get picked up. Not all books are going to get picked up. So just be gentle with yourself throughout the process. If you are in the contest model right now, be gentle, celebrate what you can. Something that always helped me was returning to the work and rereading the work to remind yourself why you do this and why you love this. When I was in grad school, there was a poet who actually went on to publish her debut collection with Black Lawrence Press. I think she graduated a few years before I had, but I remember we had a workshop at her house once, and she had gotten like finalist or semi-finalist news, and I hadn't been in the contest model yet, and I was
so excited for her. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
And she's kind of like, yeah.
Her spirits weren't where I would have assumed, having not experienced that myself. And it's just like, what's wrong? Like, this is fantastic. There's so many people who would like love to be in this position. she just shared with me very honestly and very vulnerably that this is a hard process and it can feel discouraging to get so close so often. So I just want to acknowledge the range of human feelings that goes with the contest model, the good, the bad. Like I said, for me, it was 4 years, 46 different tries. And I don't want to sit here and say to you that, just don't give up. Whatever you do, never give up, because you will get it. You will get it. I don't want to give anybody a false hope, because there are books that don't get published. I mean, that is just the sad reality of this industry. However, if you are choosing to move forward with this, which I think if you feel convicted to, I think you should, do celebrate those moments of hope as they arise. Those are really important to anchor yourself to when and if you can. And the last thing I want to talk about is the fees. It is expensive. It is expensive to spend $25 every time you want to enter a contest. For me, at the time, I was working 3 part-time jobs. I believe at the time I might have been on food stamps, and $25 felt a little bit irresponsible given my financial reality at the time. But I was telling myself, this is an investment in my future. This is an investment in my career. If I ever want to be a professor, this is how I have to go about it. Now, I have some complicated thoughts about how saturated the job market is. I talk about that in the Was My MFA video worth it? And like I said in that video, I'm not here to be prescriptive. I do not want to persuade or dissuade anybody from pursuing the path that feels best for them. I just want to be descriptive of my experience. However, from the publisher side and the editor side, if they are independent and they're not backed by a university, they are probably putting in hours and hours and hours of their time and their love. And how much time does it take to read all of these manuscripts and then produce the actual product itself? Even if editors are backed by universities, we are losing funding in the arts. We're losing funding across universities. We're gonna have the anticipated attendance cliff in 2025. I'm not suggesting that that money isn't a fair price. I'm not suggesting that that money isn't being used well or isn't needed. But again, that is a descriptive, that is just from my experience where I understand that the fees are there. For a young poet, it can be a challenge. And what I really love, I love seeing when writers on Twitter will cover the submission fees for people, especially if I think this is really awesome. People will volunteer to pay for submission fees, especially for BIPOC poets or for LGBTQIA poets. Or I love seeing the community support each other in that way, because I think that there are people who know that financial barrier does affect poets from being able to potentially share their work. So take a guess real quick in the comments below. 46 contests over 4 years. Guess how much I spent?
I mean, you probably actually could do the math if you're like, okay, 46 times 25. Let me see if that adds up.
It's pretty close, y'all. I spent in contest fees $1,207. I don't know where the 7 came from. It's a little random, but that's how much it is according to my spreadsheet.
$1,207.
The sad truth is, I probably will not make $1,200 in royalties off of my debut poetry collection. I don't know what hopefully my press is making that much money.
Oh, you can see my pajamas.
This is an actual top, but like, maybe you would sleep in it. You probably, well,
I think that's almost exactly how much money I've spent on all of my tattoos, too.
But if the average poetry collection sells about 200 copies the first year it's in press, and that typically tends to be the best selling year. Let's just say you sell 200 copies, they're $20 each, and then you get 15% of that, let's say. That would be $600. Again, I share this with you guys just for the transparency to describe my own process, but to let you know if you are in the thick of it, you are not alone by any means. Or if you're just entering in the contest submission open reading period process for your collection, just to kind of give you a sense of what you may experience, what you may run up against. So if you have made it this far, I thought I would share what is going to be the opening poem of the collection. I had swapped this poem out a few different times. I wasn't really sure how to open the poem until I went to an AWP.
Do you remember that, y'all? Do you remember in-person writing events?
I went to an AWP a few years ago and Philip B. Williams was giving a craft talk. I think it was about how to publish your first collection. And he gave the advice that your first poem should kind of be a tour guide in terms of maybe theme or style or voice, a tour guide through the rest of the collection. And that really clicked with me. And I knew which poem then I wanted to be the tour guide for Jalubí, which I don't know if I mentioned that. That is the name of the farming village where my great-great-grandparents lived in the Czech Republic, in Czechoslovakia at the time. And I thought I would share it with you now, and I'll have other poems linked down below as well. This is entitled Rovne a Duprava. Beneath a row of witches, she sweeps the sidewalk in front of her souvenir shop. I've wandered past my map's reach. We are alone with the cobblestones and cold light of street lamps sweating copper shadows on our faces. Her back bent more fantastic than the gnarled handle in her grasp. Each evening breeze flight into the pulpit of puppets above. I am not afraid of women made mythical and immoral, spinsters with snarled spines. I fear instead the loud thoughts that taunt the lost, those who cannot find home without being shown where to go. Promente, I ask, permission to break the silence the street has laced like a shawl around her shoulders. Gdeye mečem. She answers in a spell of syllables indiscernible to my ears. Finally, she casts a glance far into the dark. Rovne a Duprava. Duprava, I repeat, my tongue an apprentice in unfamiliar sounds. Tiki, I offer, husky večer into the hazy navy of the night. Duprava, straight and to the right. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. If I missed any questions that you might have about the process, definitely check out my website. There is a contact box there if you want to ask me anything in private about what the process was like. You can also check out this video where I do edits for the galley of Jalubí. And be sure, if you haven't already, to subscribe so that way you can keep track of the process and you can figure out, if you're interested, how to order a copy when they do become available for pre-order. I am so excited to one day be able to shoot the cover reveal for the book. When I started my YouTube channel back in January, that was one of the videos that I was like, oh, I get to share a cover reveal with people. So no, I am super excited about the collection. I'm also really excited to hear about any projects you're working on. So definitely let me know how things are going for you. If any of this was helpful, what questions you have, the comments are open to you. My website is open to you. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. I will see you next time. Bye.